Yeah, the sun's come up over 1,000 times. The summers and winters have cracked the mountains a little more, and the rains have brought down some of the dirt. Some babies that weren't even born before have begun talking regular sentences already. And some folks that thought they were right young and spry have found out they can't quite bound up a flight of stairs like they used to. Oh, that is without their heart fluttering a little. All that can happen in 1,000 days. Nature's been pushing and contriving in other ways, too. A number of young people fell in love and got married. Yeah, millions of gallons of water went by the mill, and the mountain got bit away a few fractions of an inch. You see, most everybody in the world gets married, and in our town, there aren't hardly any exceptions. Most everybody climbs into their graves married. Now, the first act was called the daily life. This act is called love and marriage, and there's another act coming after this, and I reckon you can guess what that's about. Anyway, it's July 7th, 1904, just after high school commencement. That's the time most of our young people here in town jump up and get married. Seems they feel like as soon as they pass their last examinations in solid geometry and Cicero's orations, they found themselves fit to be married. It's early morning. Only this time it's been raining. It's been pouring and thundering. And Mrs. Gibbs' garden here and Mrs. Webb's over there drenched. All those bean holes and pea vines drenched. Yesterday over here on Main Street it looked like curtains being blown down. Maybe again here anyway. And you can hear the 5:45 for Boston. And there's Mrs. Gibbs and Mrs. Webb coming downstairs to make breakfast, just as though it were an ordinary day. Now, I don't have to point out to the women in my audience that the two ladies they see before them here cook 3 meals a day, one of them for 20 years, the other for 40, and no summer vacation. They brought up 2 children apiece, washed and cleaned the house, and never a nervous breakdown. You see, it's like what one of those Middle West poets said. You got to love life to have life, and you got to have life to love life. It's what they call a vicious circle.
Giddy up, Bessie.
Here comes Howie Newsom delivering the milk, and there's Cy Crow delivering papers like his brother Joe before.
Morning, Howie.
Morning, Cy. Anything in the papers I ought to know?
Not much, except we're losing the best baseball pitcher Grover's Corner has ever had, George Gibbs.
Well, reckon he is.
He could hit and run bases, too.
Yep, mighty fine ball player. Whoa, Bessie. I guess you can stop and talk if I'm in mind to.
I can't imagine someone giving up baseball just to get married. Would you, Howie?
Can't tell, Cy. Never had no talent that way. Whoa, you're up early, though.
Seeing if I can do anything to prevent the flood. The river's been rising all night.
Cy Crow's all worked up here about George Gibbs' retirement from baseball.
Yes, sir. That's the way it goes around here. Back in '84, we had a mighty fine ball player. Not even George Gibbs himself could touch him. Goes by the name of Hank Todd. Went down to Maine, became a parson. Wonderful ball player. Hey, Howie, how does the weather look to you today?
Oh, it ain't bad. Think maybe it'll clear up for good.
Good morning, Howie. Do you think it'll clear up?
Morning, Mrs. Gibbs. Well, it rained so heavy. Think maybe it'll clear up.
Certainly hope it will.
Well, how much did you want today?
Well, I'm going to have a house full of relations, so I'll take 3 of milk and 2 of cream.
My wife says to tell you we both hope they'll be very happy, Mrs. Gibbs. We know they will.
Thank you. Tell your wife that we hope she gets there to the wedding.
Yes, she'll be there. She'll be there if she can. Morning, Mrs. Webb.
Oh, good morning, Mr. Newsom. I told you 4 quarts of milk, but I hope you can spare me another.
Yes, and the 2 cream?
Will it start raining again, Mr. Newsom?
Well, just saying to Mrs. Gibbs, that's how it may like now. Mrs. Newsom told me to tell you that's how we hope they'll both be very happy, Mrs. Webb. We know they will.
Thank you, and thank Mrs. Newsom. And we're counting on seeing you both at the wedding.
Yes, Mrs. Webb. We'll be there. Couldn't miss that. Come on, Bessie.
Well, Mom, the day has come. Losing one of your chicks.
Frank Gibbs, don't you say another word. I feel like crying every minute. Sit down and drink your coffee.
The groom's up shaving himself, on an and off lots of shave, whistling and singing like he's glad to leave us. Every now and then he says, "I do" to the mirror, but don't sound convincing to me.
Frank, how will they get along? I've arranged George's clothes, and and made sure that he puts on warm things. Emily won't think of such things. He'll catch his death of a cold within a week.
I was remembering my wedding morning, Julie.
Now don't start that, Frank Gibbs.
I was the scaredest young fellow in the state of New Hampshire. I thought I'd make a mistake for sure. When I saw you coming down that aisle, I thought you were the prettiest girl I'd ever seen. Problem is, I never even seen you before. There I was in a congregational church, marrying a total stranger.
And how do you think I felt? Weddings are perfectly awful things. Farces, that's what they are. Here, I made you something.
Why, Julie Heresy, French toast.
Tain't hard to make, and I had to do something with my time.
How did you sleep last night, Julie?
Well, I heard most of the hours struck off.
Yes. I get a shock every time I think of George saying to be a family man. It's a great gangling thing. I tell you, Julie, there's nothing so terrifying in the world as a son. The relationship between a father and son is the awkwardest.
Well, let me tell you, Frank Gibbs, mother and daughter's no picnic either.
They'll have a lot of troubles, I suppose, but everyone has to rant their own troubles.
Yes, people are meant to go through life 2 by 2. Tain't natural to be lonesome.
Julie, you know one of the things I was scared of when I married you?
Oh, go along with you.
I was scared we wouldn't have material for conversation more or less than a few weeks. I thought we would run out and eat our meals in silence. That's a fact. But you and I have been conversing for 20 years now without any noticeable barren spells.
Well, good weather, bad weather, tain't very choice. I always find something to say. Did you hear Rebecca stirring around upstairs?
No. Only day of the year Rebecca has been managing her own business up there. She's hiding in the room. I got the impression she's crying.
Oh, land's sakes, this has got to stop. Rebecca, Rebecca, come get your breakfast.
Good morning, everybody. Only 5 more hours to live.
George Gibbs, where are you going?
Just stepping across the grass to see my girl.
It's raining torrents. Put on your overshoes.
Oh, Ma, it's just a step.
You are not to leave the house without you're prepared for it.
George, do as your mother tells you.
From tomorrow on, you can kill yourself in all weathers, but while you live in my house, you'll live wisely, thank you. Maybe Mrs. Webb isn't used to call us at 7 o'clock in the morning. Here, take some coffee first.
Be back in a minute. Good morning, Mother Webb.
Goodness, you frightened me. Now, George, you can come in a minute out of the wet, but you know I can't ask you in.
Why not?
You know as well as I do. The groom can't see his bride on his wedding day, not until he sees her in church.
Ah, that's just a superstition. Good morning, Mr. Webb.
Good morning, George.
Mr. Webb, you don't believe in that superstition, do you?
Well, there's a lot of common sense in some superstitions, George.
Many have followed it, and you don't want to be the first to fly in the face of custom.
How is Emily?
She hasn't waked up yet. Haven't heard a sound out of her.
Emily's asleep?
No wonder. We were up till all hours sewing and packing. Now, I'll tell you what I'll do. You sit down here a minute with Mr. Webb and drink this cup of coffee, and I'll go see Emily doesn't come down the stairs and surprise you. There's some bacon too, but don't be long about it.
Well, George, how are you?
Oh, fine. I'm fine. Mr. Webb, what sense could there be in a superstition like that?
Well, you see, on her wedding day, a girl's head has to be full of clothes and one thing and another. Don't you think that's probably it?
Yes. I never thought of that.
A girl's head has to be a mite nervous on her wedding day.
I wish a fella could get married without all that marching up and down.
Listen, every man that's ever lived has felt that way about it, George, but it hasn't been any use. For a while now, the women have it all their own. A man looks pretty small at the wedding, George. All those good women standing shoulder to shoulder, making sure the knots tied in a mighty public way.
But you believe in it, don't you, Mr. Webb?
Oh yes, oh yes. Don't you misunderstand me, my boy. Marriage is a wonderful thing. Wonderful thing. And don't you ever forget that, George.
No, sir. Mr. Webb, how old were you when you got married?
Well, you see, I had taken some time to get settled after college. But Mrs. Webb, she wasn't much older than what Emily is now. Oh, age hasn't much to do with it, George. Not compare with, other things.
What were you going to say, Mr. Webb?
Oh, I don't know. Was I going to say something? George, I was thinking the other day of some advice that my father gave me when I got married. Charles, he said, Charles, start out early showing who's boss. Best thing to do is just to give an order, even if it don't make sense, just so she'll learn to obey. Oh, and he said, if anything about your wife irritates you, her conversation or anything, just get up and leave the house. That'll make it clear to her. Oh, and he said, never, never let your wife know how much money you have. Never.
Well, Mr. Webb, I don't think I could.
So I took the opposite of my father's advice, and I've been happy ever since. And let that be a lesson to you, George. Never ask advice on personal matters. George, are you going to raise chickens on your farm?
What?
Are you going to raise chickens on your farm?
Well, Uncle Luke, he's never been much interested, but I
A
thought...
book came into my office, George, the other day on the philo system of raising chickens. I want you to read it. I'm thinking beginning in the small in the backyard, and I'm going to put an incubator in the cellar.
Charles, are you talking about that old incubator again? I thought you two would be talking about something worthwhile.
Well, Myrtle, if you would like to give the boy some good advice, then I'll just go upstairs and leave you alone with him.
Emily's got to come downstairs and eat her breakfast. She sends you her love, but she doesn't want to lay eyes on you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Myrtle, I guess you don't know much about that older superstition.
What do you mean, Charles?
Since the caveman, no bridegroom should see his father-in-law on the wedding day. Now remember that.
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Webb. That'll do. You see, we want to know how all this began. This whole plan to spend the life together. You know, I'm awfully interested in how things like that begin. You know how it is. You're 21, 22. You make some decisions, and then whoosh, you're 70. You've been a lawyer for 50 years, and that white-haired old lady by your side, you've eaten over 50,000 meals with. How do such things like that begin? Now, George and Emily are going to show you the conversation that they first had when they realized that, well, they figured out that, as the saying goes, that they were meant for one another. But before they do it, I want you guys to try and remember what it was like to have been very young. And particularly the days when you were first in love. When you were like a person sleepwalking and you didn't quite hear everything that was said to you, and you didn't quite always see the street you were in. You were just a little bit crazy. Would you remember that, please? Now, they'll be coming out of high school at 3 o'clock. George has just been elected president of the junior class. And as it's June, that means he'll be president his whole senior year. And Emily has just been elected secretary and treasurer. I don't have to tell you how important that is. Yep, they're coming down Main Street now.
I can't, Louise. I've got to go home. Oh, Ernestine! Ernestine! Can you come over tonight and do Latin? Isn't that Cicero the worst thing? Well, tell your mother you have to. Goodbye. Goodbye, Helen. Goodbye, Fred.
Can I carry your books home for you, Emily?
Well, thank you. It isn't far.
Excuse me a minute. Say, Bob, if I'm a little late to practice, go ahead and start anyways, and give Herb some long high ones.
Goodbye, Lizzie.
Goodbye, Lizzie. I'm awfully glad you were elected too, Emily.
Thank you.
Why are you mad at me?
I'm not mad at you.
You've been treating me so funny lately.
Well, since you asked, I might as well come right out and say it, George. Goodbye, Miss Corcoran.
Goodbye, Miss Corcoran. What is it?
I don't like the whole change that's come over you in the last year. I'm sorry if that hurt your feelings, but I've got to tell the truth and shame the devil.
A change? What do you mean?
Well, up to a year ago, I used to like you a lot, and I used to watch you as you did everything, because we've been friends so long.
And then you began spending all your time at baseball. And you never stopped to speak to anybody anymore, not even your own family you didn't. And George, it's a fact, you've got awful conceited and stuck up, and all the girls say so. They may not say so to your face, but that's what they say about you behind your back. And it hurts me to hear them say it, but I've got to agree with them a little. I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings, but I can't be sorry I said it.
I never realized that such a thing was happening to me. I guess it's hard for a fellow not to have faults creep into his character.
I always feel a man should be perfect, and I think he should be.
Oh, I don't think it's possible to be perfect, Emily.
Well, my father is, and as far as I can see, your father is. There's no reason on earth why you shouldn't be too.
Well, I feel it's the other way around, that men aren't naturally good, but girls are.
You might as well know right now that I'm not perfect. It's not as easy for a girl to be as perfect as a man because we girls are more nervous. Now I'm sorry I said all that about you. I don't know what made me say it.
Emily.
Now I can see it's not the truth at all, and I suddenly feel it wasn't very important anyway.
Emily, would you like an ice cream soda or something before you go home?
Well, thank you. I would.
Hello, Sue. How are you? Good afternoon, Miss Slocum.
Hello, George. Hello. Why, Emily Webb, what have you been crying about?
She just got an awful scare, Mr. Morgan. She almost got run over by the hardware store wagon. Everybody says that Tom Huggins drives like a crazy man.
Well, you take a drink of water, Emily. I tell you, you gotta look both ways before you cross Main Street these days. Gets worse every year. Anyways, what do you have?
I'll have a strawberry frosting. Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
No, Emily. Have an ice cream soda with me. 2 strawberry ice cream sodas, Mr. Morgan?
2 strawberry ice cream sodas. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You know, there are 125 horses in Grover's Corners this minute I'm talking to you. The state inspector was in here yesterday. Now they're bringing in these automobiles, though. The best thing you can do is just stay home. Why, I remember when a dog could lay all day right in the middle of Main Street and nothing would even come along to disturb it. Those days are through, I guess. There you are. Enjoy. Yes, Mrs. Ellis, what can I do for you?
They're so expensive.
No, don't you think of that, Emily. We're celebrating our election. And do you know what else I'm celebrating?
No.
I'm celebrating because I've got a friend who tells me all the things that ought to be told to me.
George, please don't think of that. I don't know why I said it. It's not true.
No, Emily, you stick to it. I'm glad you spoke to me about that fault in my character. But you'll see, I'm going to change so quick. You bet I'm going to change. And, Emily, I want to ask you a favor.
What?
Emily, if I do go away to agriculture college next year, will you write me a letter every once in a while?
I certainly will. I certainly will, George. Sure seems like being away 3 years, you get out of touch with things. Maybe letters from Grover's Corners wouldn't be so interesting after a while. Grover's Corners isn't a very important place when you think of all New Hampshire, and I think it's a very nice town.
The day wouldn't come when I wouldn't want to know all that was happening here in Grover's Corners. I know that's true, Emily.
I'll try to make my letters interesting.
You know, Emily, whenever I meet a farmer, I ask him if he thinks it's important to go to agriculture college to be a good farmer.
Why, George?
Yeah, and some of them even say it's a waste of time, that you can get all that information out of the pamphlets the government sends out. And Uncle Luke, he's getting old. Why, he's ready for me to start taking over the farm. Tomorrow, if I could.
My.
And like you say, being gone all that time in other places and meeting other people, boy, if anything like that could happen, I don't want to go away. I bet new people aren't any better than old ones. I'll bet they almost never are.
But George, maybe it's very important for you to go away and learn all about cattle judging and soils and all those things. Of course, I don't know.
Emily, I'm going to make up my mind right now. I won't go. I'll tell Pa about it tonight.
Why, George, I don't see why you have to decide right now. It's a whole year away.
Emily, I'm glad you spoke to me about that. That fault in my character. But there was one thing in it that was wrong. And that was that I wasn't noticing anybody. And why you say you were watching me as I did everything? Well, I was doing the same about you the whole time. Why, sure. I always thought about you as one of the chief people I thought about, and I always made sure where you were sitting on the bleachers, and who you were sitting with, and for 3 days now I've been trying to walk you home, but something's always gotten in the way. Yesterday, I was standing over against the wall over there, but you walked home with Miss Corcoran.
Why, George, life's awful funny. How could I have known that? Why, I thought...
Emily, I'm going to tell you why I'm not going to agriculture school. I feel that once you've found a person you're very fond of, I mean someone that's very fond of you too, and likes you enough to be interested in your character, well, I feel it's just as important as college is, and even more so. That's what I think.
I think it's very important, too.
Emily, if I do improve and make a big change, would you be? I mean, could you be?
I am now. I always have been.
So, I guess this has been an important talk we've been having.
Yes. Yes.
Wait just a minute, and I'll walk you home. Mr. Morgan, I'll have to go home and get you the money to pay you for these.
What's that? George Gibbs, do you mean to tell me that you...
Yes, but I had reasons, Mr. Morgan. Look, here's my gold watch to keep until I return with your money. It'll only take me a minute.
That's okay, George. You keep your watch and I'll trust you. Trust you 10 years, George Gibbs. Not a day over. Got over all your shock, Emily?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Morgan. It was nothing.
I'm ready.
Well, let's get on with the wedding. And now, there are a lot of things to be said about a wedding, and there are a lot of thoughts that go on during a wedding. Now, naturally, we can't get them all into one wedding, especially one here in Grover's Corners, where, honestly, they're awfully plain and short. Now, in this wedding, I play the minister, which gives me a right to say a few more things about it. For a while now, our play does get pretty serious. Like Mrs. Gibbs said a few moments ago, people were made to live 2 by 2. Now, this is a good wedding, but even at a good wedding, people are so put together that there's a lot of confusion way down deep in people's minds. And we thought that ought to be in our play, too. And let's not forget all the other witnesses to this wedding. The ancestors. Millions of them. And most of them set out to live 2 by 2 also. Millions of them. Well, that's my sermon. Wasn't very long anyway.
George Gibbs? George Gibbs, what's the matter?
I don't want to go. Why is everybody pushing me so?
Why, George, you wanted this.
No, Ma, listen to me.
No, George, you're a man now.
No, Ma, for the last time I asked you. All I want to do is be a fella.
If anyone should hear you, why, I'm ashamed of you.
What? Where's Emily?
You gave me such a turn.
Cheer up, Ma. I'm getting married. Now, you say Thursday night. Emily and I are going over every Thursday night for dinner. You'll see. Come on, what are you crying for? We've got to get ready for this.
I've never felt so alone in my whole life. And George over there, I hate him. I wish I were dead. Papa! Papa!
Emily? Emily, now don't get upset.
Papa, I don't want to get married.
You're just nervous, Emily.
Why can't I stay for a while just as I am? Let's go away.
No, Emily. Now stop and think a minute.
Don't you remember that you used to say, all the time you used to say, all the time, that I was your girl? There must be lots of places we can go to. I'll work for you. I can keep house.
You mustn't say such things, Emily. You're just nervous. George! George! Will you come over here a minute? Wow, you're wearing the best young fellow in the world. George is a fine fellow.
But Papa,
George, I'm giving you my daughter. Do you think you can take care of her?
I want you, Mr. Webb. I want to try. Emily, I love you. I need you, Emily.
if you love me, help me. All I want is someone to love me.
I will, Emily. Emily, I'll try.
And I mean forever. Do you hear? Forever and ever.
Now come, you're waiting for us. You know it'll be all right. Come first.
Do you, George, take this woman, Emily, to be your lawful wedded wife? To have?
Perfectly lovely wedding. Loveliest wedding I ever saw. I do love a good wedding, don't you? Doesn't she make such a lovely bride?
I do. And do you, Emily, take this man, George, to be your lawful wedded husband? To have?
Don't know when I've seen such a lovely wedding. I always cry. Don't know why that is, but I always cry. I just like to see young people happy, don't you? Oh, I think it's lovely.
You know, I've married over 200 couples in my day. You know how it is. M marries Ann, and then it's the cottage. And then the Sunday afternoon rides in the Ford, and the first rheumatism, and the grandchildren, and the second rheumatism, and the deathbed, and the reading of the will. Once in 1,000 times it's interesting.
Aren't they a lovely couple? Oh, I've never been to such a nice wedding. I'm sure they'll be happy. I always say, happiness, that's the great thing. The important thing is to be happy.
And that's the second act, folks. 10 minutes intermission.